This episode is sponsored by Masa Israel Journey. Okay, guys, you have to check out Masa Israel Journey. If you're listening to this episode, you probably have some interest in Israel. Well, Masa Israel Journey is the marketplace for long-term opportunities in Israel. You can explore your career path, you can live out your passions, and you can make a positive impact on the world. During the pandemic, Masa also created options to study and work remotely from Israel. You don't need to pause your life. You don't need to know Hebrew to join, but you do get funding when you apply. So learn more at masaisrael.org/2nicejewishboys. That's masaisrael.org/2nicejewishboys, spelled out 2 nice Jewish boys. Check it out. This is Eitan Weinstein.
And I'm Naor Menninger, and you're listening to 2 Nice Jewish Boys.
This podcast is sponsored by The Forward. Stay up to date with unlimited access to news, culture, and opinion, all through a Jewish lens. And for our listeners, for 2NJB listeners, get 6 months of The Forward for only $10. That's 67% off. An exclusive subscription offer for our listeners, forward.com/2NJB, and get 6 months for $10. Also in collaboration with Arutz Sheva, IsraelNationalNews.com. And last but not least, in collaboration with Australian Jewish News, check them out at ajn.timesofisrael.com. This podcast is produced by Sam Glon. From Mark and Steve to Bill and Elon, when scrolling through any list of the top figures in tech, there are practically no female faces. And it's not just at the top. According to some statistics, in the US, women represent only 14% of software engineers, and only 25% of all computer science-related jobs. It's not much better in Silicon Wadi either. As of 2017, women made up only 29% of all computer science students in Israel. So why is this? Why in 2021, in the age of equality, is there still such a wide gap? And finally, are we doing something about it? Ruth Polachek is the chairwoman, founder, and CEO for 6 of the last 7 years of SheCodes, a community of 30,000 Israeli female software developers. SheCodes has as its mission statement the goal of reaching 50% female representation in the tech industry within a decade. Ruth is also currently CEO and co-founder of a new digital health venture, LessTests, which aims to make COVID-19 testing as accessible as possible to everyone around the world. We are super thrilled to be joined by Ruth Polachek today on the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having
Hello.
me. Hi, good morning.
So we're going to start with SheCodes. We're going to talk a little bit about LessTests, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah. So you're a programmer?
I'm also a programmer. So first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur,
Okay.
and I can also program.
Usually they come together, no?
Very often. Very often it comes together. But it's important as an entrepreneur to be able to do anything that is necessary. So for me, that's how I started.
But actually, some of the, like, while I was looking through some of the big names in tech, like the biggest female names, while the biggest male names are often actually coders, right? Like
Yes.
People in software engineering, like Steve Jobs and Mark Zuckerberg and Bill Gates. Some of the biggest names that I know of in tech that are female, like Sheryl Sandberg, for example, are not from the tech side, right? They're from the business side.
Well, depends who. I mean, there's also Marissa Mayer and there's other, but there's just not so many. So
Yeah.
you don't have a lot to pick from. So obviously there are a lot of big names of men that are also not coders. You think of some when you have small numbers, you just have small numbers.
But you were first a coder, or were you first a coder or an entrepreneur?
No, first an entrepreneur for me.
Yeah? How?
Yes. I mean, I'm not talking chronologically, but I'm talking
Spiritually.
in my heart. I think there's a lot of things you can do. And as an entrepreneur, I realized that I have to understand what is going on. And I had to kind of dabble myself in code and also understand what my programmers are doing. I did learn how to code when I was a kid, but I didn't, it was never a career. I never worked in it for a lengthy period of time. And also my degrees, economics, philosophy. So it's a completely other discipline. But for me still, it's really important when you're building something to understand it completely. So I kind of went and dived in.
So why is it, do you think, that there's not so many women in coding?
I think it's a social thing. Society gives positive reinforcement for various things for women and for different things for men, or rather it starts when they're kids. So for boys and for girls, and you don't focus on what you don't get positive reinforcement for.
You don't think there's like any, I'm gonna play devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
But you don't think there's any difference between the genders as far as what we're naturally driven towards?
I think I don't know. I think the society has such a strong effect on us. We can't even tell. We can't even identify to ourselves what is the natural. I mean, it could be the other way around. I mean, when you look at math at schools, girls have better grades, at least, and some research shows that. So it's really hard to say what is the natural. It's really hard to kind of identify. And society has such a strong effect on this that you really can't say.
So how did you become an entrepreneur then?
It's interesting. It's something that I was very curious about, and I felt it was a challenge I wanted to take on. I had, when I was young, I wanted to be a doctor, actually, like my grandfather. And I basically took a lot of studies and made sure that I can go, and in Israel, it's not pre-med, but it's kind of similar. You have to get certain grades and so forth. And I wanted to make sure that I can do it. And after, I think, maybe a decade of when I was a kid, when it came time to sign up for college, I was thinking, wait, if I sign up, then that's the rest of my life, because you have to be very dedicated in this profession. And I wanted to leave things open and do various things and have a kind of large effect on actually on things I didn't even know what that meant. And I wanted to go into the business world, which I also didn't know what it meant, because nobody in my family, everybody's kind of employees. We hardly have anyone in the family who's an entrepreneur. And I wanted to learn, basically, how sometimes you don't know what you don't know. So that's how I decided to.
That's how you got into it.
Yeah.
So at what point when did you start your first venture? Like, was it,
Thank you.
early on, or did it happen later?
No, it was later. I think, for now it's over a decade ago, but I wasn't a kid who started small entrepreneurial endeavors.
No lemonade stand.
No, I didn't do lemonade stands. I'm actually
it's never too late.
It's true. I should think about that. Yeah, it's probably No, I know of people who. I think it excited me when I heard about people who did that, but I wasn't exposed to it as a kid. I think now that we have also in She Codes, we have programs for women, including for teenagers. And I always think, if I had that when I was a girl, I would have loved that. But I had no access to that. No one in my immediate, as I said, no one in my family or immediate friends. As I said, it's a social thing. Nobody did it. So I didn't even know when I decided that I wanted to do something business-wise, I didn't even know what that meant. I didn't know, that's why I went to study economics, among other things, but I didn't even know how to reach out and do these things. And so it's kind of a really long journey of learning. And that's why I went into finance. And a few years after I was in finance, I realized that the actual, where things happen is the companies. Because we were, when I was trading equity of companies. When I was an investment banker, we were working on M&A and IPO deals of the companies, and we were always thinking about what are the companies, and within the company, you also see the entrepreneurs or the actual people who built it. So then I realized that the builders and everything else, the legal and accounting. And that actually early on, I realized that I was thinking maybe when I decided I'm not going to go into this, and I started considering other options, and I realized, wait, when you study accounting or law, you're actually consulting to whoever's actually doing the things. The real work. And then I had this journey, and when I went into finance, then I realized, wait, I'm still not actually building. And that kind of got me to understand that the actual building happens in the building of companies, inventors. And that's how I got back into tech, because even though my parents are in tech, this whole journey for me was going away from tech because that's where my parents were. I started by trying to go where my grandfather did, and then going into a world I have no idea what it is. And then I realized, wait, tech, this is really, right, okay, 15 years ago, tech is where things are being built these days. And if you want to build something, you have to do it in tech.
It's funny how all our lives are around rebelling
and
it's true. Coming
and
back.
Finding ourselves,
trying to go against your parents, and in the end of the day,
this is what it's all about.
Walking in circles,
right?
Basically.
Getting back to the origins.
Right.
It's really clear.
So what did your parents and your grandfather, you said they were in tech? What did they do?
No, so my grandfather, he was a doctor. That's the that connection, which is actually related to my current startup. It's a different story.
We'll get to it in a bit.
Yeah. No, my parents are both in tech. My father, data security. My mom, more like fintech, and actually like product, I should say. So it's things that I've
but that's I mean like, I don't know how old your parents are, but I mean that's like not usual, right? That people from that generation would be in positions like that. I mean, there's few, right?
That's true. Yeah, my father always says that he lives in the country that didn't exist when he was born, because they made Aliyah. And he works in a profession that didn't exist when he was born. So he studied math. He wanted to go into computers because he saw it was growing. And the computer science degree didn't exist. So he studied math. And then my mom, after we when I was young, my older siblings are already in school, went into tech as well because of my father as well.
But your father, so he studied math, but at some point he must have like studied computer science, coding. I mean, at some point he must have added that to it.
It didn't exist.
But
there
now
was no
he works
such
in
degree.
data security, no?
Well, right away. He wanted to work in computers.
Yeah.
So he, at the time, in order to do that, you had to study math. That was the only option.
No, but I'm saying today, does he deal with coding?
Well, today he's retired already, but he worked in computers in coding
You
for
could
years.
study it as you worked, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, you had possibly, I don't know actually if they had a few courses at the time in school, but there was no curriculum that was entirely computer science because there weren't enough people that were interested in it or working. The industry wasn't
Did he
as
immediately go into data security?
Yes, immediately. That's what he wanted to do.
Okay.
In computers and coding. I don't know exactly what he did at the beginning, but
in a sense, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is, in a sense, that entrepreneurial gene seems to have been there. Because, right, your father, like, the idea of going into a space where, I mean, entrepreneurial is all, right? What does entrepreneurial mean? It means like entering a new area, right?
yes.
And disrupting it.
But not necessarily, I mean, just the basic meaning of entrepreneurial
Uncharted territories.
Yeah, is entering new, right? So the idea that, data security didn't exist when he was born. It probably didn't exist for the first 20 years of his life, but,
It's true. It's it was very rare. And I think, how you cannot be what you cannot see. So his uncle was actually involved in, he was a professor of math, but he was involved in one of the first computers, World War II. So it's something that we were aware of in the family, but it was something that was very rare, and there was not a kind of industry and a profession, but it was clear that it's going to go there.
So what was your first venture?
My first venture was called Flakes. This was 2009. I just left Lehman Brothers. After
when everybody was leaving
storm.
Lehman Brothers.
Although I actually left a few months before. But I wanted to do something web or mobile. Actually, the first one was actually before this one. I wanted to, it never came about to be a product, but I was exploring phone numbers. I realized that everything we were doing was focused on emails, and Facebook at the time was very early on. And since I did a exchange program in the US, I was an early user, and I knew that everybody was taking your emails, and I was thinking, wait, what about the phone numbers? That's your real network, the people you call, the people you speak with. So I started exploring, this is even before this, like 2008. I started exploring what I could do and build with using phones and phone numbers. This was before iPhone and Android were what they are. And at the time, some of them were starting to come out and apps were starting to come out. But even just before that, they didn't have a large market share, and I was sitting with developers for phones, and they explained to me, I remember I had a specific call, which kind of got me off this idea. Because this developer said, look, there are too many phones with too many different operating systems. And if you want to do something for phones, it's too complicated and not possible.
Little did he know.
So that was, yeah, exactly. And I actually saw the guy a year or so ago. And he's like, yeah, I was wrong. I was wrong. And it was around the time that they were coming out. And I thinking of myself at the time, I wasn't early enough to take the shift, because I could have said, wait, these are going to take over, and I could just focus early on a growing market. And then I moved to kind of focus on web apps, and I focused on that for a while. But I think many times I happened to see things early on and not take on the opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's exactly the learning and the experience, because
Yeah.
you never catch things early on.
But it's the classic story of entrepreneurship, right? Because so many startups start from you pitching an idea to someone who knows his shit, as they say, and he says to you it's the worst idea he ever heard and it will fail, right?
Yes.
And then what do you do about that? Some persist and some give up, and the rest is history.
Absolutely. It's really funny. For some reason, very often when people talk to me in these kind of contexts or others, they keep saying, give me advice. What's your advice to female entrepreneurs, for young coders or anything? And the thing I always say is, don't listen to advice, including this one, because it's not possible. You're the only one who knows what you're trying to do or where you're trying to go. And anyone giving you advice is giving you their perspective, and it may not be relevant to what you're trying to do.
But it's like the paradox of life, right? Because it's like always walking that fine line between one thing and the exact opposite. Because it's like you don't want to be the person who shuts out all feedback and never listen, but like at the same time you have to follow your heart. So it's this like gray area.
I know,
right?
and it's hard. The problem is, and especially for me, but I think a lot of people, it's really hard not to listen to advice. It's really hard. It's difficult because you always feel like, oh, someone must know. I mean,
Especially if it's someone big.
Exactly, someone you respect. The example I gave, he has experience. He had over 10 or 20 years, maybe 10 or more years of the field.
Those are the people who tend to have hubris, I guess.
That's very true. And also they have the current view of the situation and not necessarily what it could go to. And they're really immersed in the current state, that it's hard to imagine something else.
So when did you feel like you had your first success? Like there was something that was like, okay, I'm doing all right here.
I kind of feel really uncomfortable with the word success.
Okay.
Because it's always in the eye, as you said, it's in the eyes of the beholder. My really first decision was to quit Lehman. I don't know if that's not considered a success. I can tell you what I think people consider success. SheCodes is what it's definitely considered my big success. But I have so many plans for SheCodes that I still feel like it's a small organization, even though it's the biggest organization of training software engineers, male or female, in Israel.
Mm-hmm. Tell a bit about it to the people who don't know.
Of course. So SheCodes is an organization that I built. We currently have tens of thousands of members and participants. Every year, we train thousands of members. This year specifically, we had 2,200 women who completed courses. And this is just part of the activities. We have many hackathon, which is coding events, lectures, workshops for female engineers and aspiring engineers. So it's both the current software engineers who want to expand their knowledge, learn new skills, because this is lifelong learning, and in tech especially, you always have new technologies, but also women who are interested in joining the field, whether youngsters, like I mentioned before, teenagers and girls, but also mainly women in their early stages of their career, whether they're students or choosing what degree to go. In Israel, you do it a few years after college. You choose your major. After high school, you choose where you go to college and your major. But also 5-10 years into your career, very often you're interested in making some career changes and understanding maybe you want to do something a little different than what you studied. So we have, in the past few years, we have an average of 800 women that we are aware that were placed or were promoted, that were part of our community. In looking at numbers, because Israel is a strong country, this is literally we can count as percent of the industry.
Before COVID, you had events and conventions and lectures, hackathons.
Yeah, I want to share with you that we still have, and actually this has been the biggest year we've had. It's all Zoom and online events, but we've actually everything we're doing was actually bigger. We had twice as many women participated in events. Maybe it's just easier because it's only the time and not also the location that you have to make sure that you arrive at. But also more women who are participating in courses completed them. We have a lot of participants who come just to be exposed, and then we encourage them sometimes to go and get a degree in the field or go to expand their knowledge in other ways. But we also have curriculum and courses, and more women went on to continue and complete courses than ever before.
So I want to ask you about academic inflation. Like, what's your take on, a woman who wants to, she just now finished the army, not in 8200 or in any kind of place that gave her a good basis for software development, and she has two choices. She can either go study computer sciences, or maybe take a boot camp or join She Codes, learn some basic coding, and go start working. What's like?
Hands down, a degree. I really have to say. I mean, She Codes. It's not either or. You still, I think, obviously, it's important to be part of the community and have peers that are doing something similar and have the support of your peers. But a degree is a curriculum that gives you everything that is considered basic, especially in some of the things you have to do in the future.
But so many coders and high-tech people in Israel don't have a degree.
It's very true, but you have to kind of, if you look into the segmentation of them, the really top ones, there are three options. Either they do have a degree, or they did it since they were kids and did it in the army as well. And the third slice of really top ones is very rare. It's not very common. It's possible. I'm not saying it's not possible.
Like self-taught, you mean?
Self-taught, completely self-taught, didn't go through any kind of organized. It's possible. It's just more difficult. Why would you make your own life difficult if you have the opportunity to do it the right way? If you're
many don't have. Some would say many don't have the opportunity to do it the right way, which leads to the question: does any girl in the periphery can become a programmer?
Absolutely. I was just talking now at the top programmers, and I think the important thing to note is that most people in tech are not the top programmers. I would encourage people to go get a degree, because I would encourage anyone to be those top programmers, algorithm developers, and people who are the highest paid, the more chances for advancement. Any place that you try to apply will hire you. But I would even say it's 80-20. I think 80% of developers are just coders building stuff, not necessarily the lead tech person on the team. And there's a lot that can be done there and a lot that you can do. And obviously I encourage, and I think any girl or guy across the country in periphery or elsewhere can get into tech and specifically into coding. But I do think if you have the time and the abilities, that it's better to get the kind of basic, also theoretical background, because that's what it is. A lot of it is the theoretical, not just the hands-on. Obviously, hands-on is really important when you get into the nitty-gritty, and it's really important what experience you have. After a few years in tech, all that matters is what experience you have. But in order to get a really a strong base, that's what I recommend.
LessTests.
Yes.
Can we talk about that?
Sure.
How did it come to be?
Well, around March, when I was working, basically still in SheCodes, we kind of got all the organization online very quickly because everything was digitalized, and I wanted to see what else I can do to help. And I'm very fortunate. I'm in various forums and groups of innovative people in Israel, and there was basically brainstorming. A lot of people wanted to take part. I did a lot of other things to help. And then the matter of testing came up, and pool testing specifically. And apparently I found out that in biology, there's this practice that's been around for many, many years in academia, but has not been implemented in the field, in labs. And that's pool testing, which is basically increasing the number of tests through group testing. And specifically, after that, many places started doing it across the world. But there's a specific way of doing it using math, which is more efficient and quicker. And that's combinatorial pooling. We can get into it if you'd like. But that is basically using an algorithm to do the pooling in a one shot instead of two steps.
Because the problem is, as COVID is more and more common, right? You need to do more and more tests.
Yes.
And at some point you reach such masses of tests.
Exactly.
And there's a risk of collapse. The whole system can collapse, essentially.
So the idea is to test 12 people at a time? And if the COVID test returns positive, then you test them individually?
So basically, that's the basic pooling. And our program actually does it more efficiently. The basic pooling says, let's take groups of 12, and in this one there's low prevalence rate. So in each group of 12, if the entire tube was negative, we can now release 12 people instead of checking individually 12. But then if it's positive, you have to check individually each of these people.
And the problem is in countries like now in Israel, because it's COVID is so common now, the chances of having 12 with zero, it becomes it's better. Lower. It's more efficient when you have low numbers, but when you have high numbers,
when you have high numbers, this is really a problem. You can't really use it. So what our program does is basically each sample, and this already is the case, each sample you put in multiple tubes. And in each of the tubes, it basically exists with other samples.
So 12 become...
you can take the 12 become 24 or 36.
And the 36 become...
But each of them are basically placed in different tubes. So I take the 12 people and I put them, instead of in one tube, in 3 tubes, for instance. So then in each of these tubes, you have but different people. So if you have 12, you still have 12 in the tube, but these 12 in the tube are from these 12 people, and the next tube are from 12 different people, and perhaps one person will be in these 2 tubes, and the third one will be in another tube.
So you increase the chance of a negative person finding a tube where he's totally negative.
Exactly. And then where someone is completely negative, you know he's negative, you checked him 3 times. If someone's positive, he's going to be positive in the 3 different tubes. Now, what's great about it is you don't have to check him again, because you see what tubes were positive, and you know that the only person that his sample was in these 3 tubes is this specific person.
Wow.
Because all the rest of the...
Math.
It's better than sex. You
Because-
should have seen Eitan now.
You've been doing too much math.
Okay.
but
It
that's
sounds too good to be true, though. What's the catch?
okay. The catch is that there's a lot of integration into the labs that needs to be done, and also it's kind of a I think kind of a concept, the conceptual. You have to kind of think about it for a second until you get it, and then in the labs you have to integrate it, and you have to see now. Using these methods, you can actually save 80-90% of the cost. It's incredible because if you
Just for reference, I read today that we pay now with so many tests we're doing in Israel. It costs the country about 500 million shekels a month or something like that.
And I also heard they just lowered
not
tax
surprising.
brackets in Israel, meaning we're going to start paying more taxes. Maybe
the matter
possibly
of
because of
the
this.
cost here is really insane.
Yeah.
It's but the problem is, and if you're talking about the catch, is that the labs are not the ones paying. So the lab are the one making decisions, but they're not the ones paying.
So why would they become more efficient?
Why would they have an incentive to become
Right.
more efficient? Exactly. So that's actually the main battle we've had this year.
And this has to do with all the discussion here in Israel about how amazing our health system is, how amazing the vaccine because of the socialized health system.
And it's not not
Yeah.
an efficient. It's not striving to be efficient. They don't care. They do care about the health,
But to an extent.
To an extent, yeah, exactly. So for us, it's been a real challenge. However, we were very fortunate because the first step was getting regulatory approval. And in regular circumstances, this is a process that could take years. And we were very, very fortunate that it actually took us less than 2 months, which was kind of very speedy process. And since then, we were working with the Ministry of Health because that's who's the decision maker in Israel to implement this. And we're actually now working on implementing in 2 different Israeli HMOs, 2 of the 3 largest Israeli HMOs, doing validation.
Which are?
Meuchedet and Maccabi. And we're...
I might be in a tube with 11 other people.
Yeah, exactly.
It'll be the peak of your career.
3 tubes.
No, a lot of us are really excited because we were doing Meuchedet for a while, and now we're starting with Maccabi. And
Which is bigger.
It's just bigger, exactly. And a bunch of our team members, including myself, were Maccabi. So we're like, okay, I want to get tested.
Yeah.
And I want to see that when we see the data that I find the tube where I was in. And I mean, we don't have personal people's information, but we do have the kind of code. So I'm planning when I get tested to see what's the code they used to see whether I can identify it later in the data.
This could be breakthrough though for other diseases. I mean, right? For flu, or is this already a technique that's used?
No, absolutely. It's hardly used. Even the regular pooling, the combinatorial pooling is not used at all. And we're literally thinking of post-COVID strategy. The labs are already talking to us about it. The very first time we came to a lab, the very first test in that we did the first experiment, which was in May, they started telling us, you can do this for cities, you can do this for CMVs, you can do, like they started every single lab we come to starts sharing with us what else could be done.
Is it patented?
We're applying. However, we kind of feel like it's the most important part here is really a lot of the integrations. So it's not just the algorithm itself specifically.
Because each company, each healthcare company has different infrastructure.
Right, exactly.
Very old sometimes.
Exactly. This is exactly legacy systems if we're talking
Windows
about
XP.
tech. Yeah. that's even good if it's
What's wrong
XP.
with Windows XP?
It's not, yeah. You're way
Pascal.
ahead of the curve. Yeah, it's most of these systems it's really hard to innovate in the medical world. For me, it's coming full circle. We discussed, I was thinking of going into medicine, and part of why I didn't is I wanted to build things. So building things for the medical world for me is really exciting.
So Grandpa could be proud in the end of the day.
Yeah, what's really interesting is when I was growing up and he knew that I wanted to go into medicine, he kept telling me, genetics, genes. That's the future. Go into that. This is like the 90s. And when we do the testing here, it's actually testing genes. So,
Wow.
yeah.
That's amazing. So what's the prediction for the upcoming months? Like, I'm guessing you're not fully implemented yet. Do you plan to be in those?
Yes, we're working now on the implementation in these two HMOs. We actually have a few projects also overseas, outside of Israel. And we're interested in increasing international reach. We think that it's funny because across the world, we're focusing still on COVID. But in Israel, because of the vaccines, everybody's asking us, what's after COVID? Because that's like, we see it. So we're working very hard on the post-COVID strategy as well, just because we're very fortunate to be in that place right now.
So part of LessTests is, as you said, the integration. So I'm assuming there's a lot of software development.
Yes, absolutely. We have a lot of integration.
So there's crossover with she codes.
Completely.
Sure.
I mean, this isn't
Do you have she codes?
Team members, yes.
Yeah.
I had like one of the first ones was from She Codes, and I'm hiring more now. I'm looking for coders at She Codes as well. It's it's exciting. We can do kind of crossover.
You have your own bank of developers that you can just pick
What's
from.
so funny is that for the past few years, everybody keeps coming to me for software engineers and developers, and now I'm looking. So I kind of feel embarrassed to ask people because they're like, don't you have a bunch of engineers? And I'm like, what do you mean? I don't own anyone, you know?
I gave you my best ones.
Exactly. I already gave them out. So it's in the end of the day, in She Codes, it's a network. It's a community. I'm a person like anyone else, so I can reach out to these people, but like anyone else who comes to She Codes and can find software engineers, and we have a career center that has companies. We have over 200 companies that we work with, so they take everyone already.
You got to work it into the contract that you get first pick. If they join She Codes, you own them.
Okay.
That's what Jeff Bezos would have done.
Yeah.
But you know,
I need to improve my.
I can't help but think about one thing you said during this conversation. You know, they say, I don't know if it's true, but one of the reasons women are getting paid less than men is because they don't demand, right? They don't have the chutzpah to demand. And I felt that thing about you when you said that you don't like the word success. I don't think Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos would ever say they don't like the word success. On the contrary.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, because people keep asking me about my success, and I don't feel very comfortable about it, and that's a good point.
So maybe, do you think it's a gender thing? Maybe
it may very well be. It may very well be. I just feel like there's so much more to do that I kind of feel like this is hopefully just the beginning.
Is there advocacy in She Codes for closing the gender pay gap as well, or is it just more focused on software development?
We're working on that as well. We don't have in two ways. One is because it's a community, we're really focusing on the network. So if you're interviewing to a job, you have who to consult with. So I know of several, and obviously I don't know everything about everyone, but I do know several team members who told me, okay, I asked her and therefore I'm making this X more, like considerable amounts. And second, we're trying to make it more formal. So we have a course called Landing a Job. And that course has a section discussing also negotiating your salary. Mm-hmm. However, we are kind of discussing doing kind of a more wide, it's more about data. You talked about maybe potentially about the way I word things, but versus other entrepreneurs, although I don't know that I'm on that level yet. Maybe when I get there, I will feel more comfortable. But I think that maybe across the board sharing information, because sometimes when you tell someone to ask for a specific amount, and when she's asked in the interview how much she expects to get paid, a lot of women say, well, I hear these numbers and it just sounds preposterous. Mm-hmm. And I can't even fathom saying it. And we feel and we see that. So once they see it more and more and we kind of share more information, I think that can help narrowing the wage gap.
So let's do that. maybe that's a good way to end. For women listening who are looking to enter the field, what's a normal salary, average salary, if you are coming out of a computer science degree at an entry-level position with 5 years experience, with 10 years experience?
I don't want to say because it changes, and also I can't say there are two things how to go about it. Okay. First of all, there are companies that put out this information.
Glassdoor, no? In Glassdoor.
There's Glassdoor. There's HR companies that actually, and they put out numbers, and you can actually see what exactly you learned, whether you have 0 to 1, 2 to 3, and everything that you said. So check that out. Mm-hmm. And those are hard numbers, and sometimes they look too high for you, too low for you, but those are numbers that they have and that they know, and they put out as aggregate numbers. That's one thing. The second thing I would say, and we had a discussion on one of our Facebook groups this week on this topic, and someone said, ask a male friend how much to ask for. No matter how high that sounds to you, don't ask for less. So I think those are two ways to go about it, and ask a few male friends.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's interesting. I wonder what it would look like to compare married women salary to single women, because sometimes there's the influence of the male spouse who's saying, who's making the pay gap is in the house.
That's
so
a good
they
question.
feel it, and they probably, but anyway, I think you're doing amazing work, really.
Yeah.
Kol hakavod, and
very inspiring.
Thank you.
From strength to strength.
Before we go, do you take donations, She Codes?
No,
donate?
we're actually we're trying to we have a lot of relationship with companies, and we're trying to build a business model that would be effective.
Okay, so no donations, but social media.
Yeah, She Codes. The main page is She Codes on Facebook.
But it's Hebrew. You don't have English.
There's some English.
We have English on the website, English website, she-codes.org, and we also have an Instagram, and a lot of it is in English for international audience.
And you're on social media. You tweet or something.
Yeah, Rutipo, RUTIPO. I'm here.
Okay, amazing. Cool. Before we go, first of all, we have an amazing producer.
Yes, Sam Glon. Thank you so much, Sam. Sam's been doing some amazing work for the podcast, helping us do outreach.
Yes.
Thank you, Sam.
And this episode is sponsored by Masa. I don't know if you heard about Masa, but they have a new website where you can actually post not jobs, but rather, how do they call it? Like internships.
Yes.
And if you're looking for interns through Masa, you can post the job there, and you'll get applications. So and this podcast is also sponsored by them, and also
the Forward, guys. Check out the forward.com. Forward's a great source for news, for opinion pieces, all through a Jewish lens. Go to forward.com/2njb for a special offer exclusively for podcast listeners, 2njb listeners. Forward.com/2njb and israelnationalnews.com. Arutz Sheva, check them out for amazing content in English about Israel and the Israeli perspective. And finally, because we're global, just like COVID, ajn.timesofisrael.com, Australian Jewish news.
COVID in Australia is on decline.
Yeah. So ajn.timesofisrael.com, Australian Jewish news, guys, for an Australian perspective on Jewish
And we
news.
accept donations. Go to 2njb.com/donate to help us out. Anything else we need to plug? No? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming.
This was great.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.